Mr. Spear, welcome to the committee. I have concerns that creating a national low-carbon fuel standard will only galvanize efforts to enact another anti-consumer regulatory scheme, such as phasing out liquid fuels through electrification mandates or banning heavy-duty diesel engines. Do you share this concern? And are there examples of such efforts in the states that have already enacted their own low-carbon fuel standards?
There are. Thank you, Senator. As I mentioned previously, we had litigated in California and Oregon, largely because of the impact that it would have on our industry, particularly medium-sized companies with 20 trucks or fewer, down to owner-operators. And those are folks that pay at the retail at the pump. They don't have fuel contracts. So the impact that this has on inflating the cost of diesel in those states and in those areas is quite measurable. It's the second largest cost drain under labor. And so this is a make or break issue in terms of keeping them out on the road moving freight. Those costs generally will be reflected in what consumers pay, your constituents. So it needs to be a gradual process that takes into account the fact that we are already facing 40-year highs in inflation. So this is just an additive on top and reflected in the fuel prices, $7 exceeding in California, nearly $6.50 in Oregon. Those are the highest in the country. So we definitely are going to defend our membership when that happens.
Well, President Biden recently noted in his State of the Union address that the U.S. would continue to need liquid fuels for at least the next 10 years. Is that a statement that you agree with?
I think it's going to be a little longer than 10, Senator. I really do. I believe we'll get there. As I said in my opening remarks, I firmly believe that we will transition in time, but it has to be inclusive. The timeline has to be realistic, and the targets have to be achievable for that to happen. I think this mad rush to zero is going to be very impactful, not just in state economies, but the national economy. So it's something we're very mindful. I think if we pace ourselves and let the market work its will, we will get to zero.
Well, I know people in Wyoming are concerned because electronic vehicles are tested at sea level, which Wyoming is not, tested on flat ground, which Wyoming is not, tested at 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which Wyoming rarely is. In fact, today it's 0 degrees again in Casper, Wyoming. So those factors change the distance one can travel on a charge dramatically, and I don't think that is well understood. So hopefully we can bring some of those factors to light in the coming months. Mr. Cooper, thank you for being here as well. As you know, the EPA issued what's called their SET rule, which, among other things, set RVO limits for the next 3 years and proposed to create a pathway for electric vehicles participation in the RFS. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned with how the EPA is proposing that auto OEMs generate E-RINs. What's your level of concern with the E-RINs proposal from EPA?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator, and we share your concern with the way that EPA is proposing to allow electricity into the RFS program. We're not opposed to the inclusion of electricity in the RFS, but it's got to be done right. And we share your concern that in the case of these E-RINs, the generator of those credits would be the automaker, like Tesla, and that's completely different, completely inconsistent with how RIN credit generation is done across any other fuel that is regulated under the RFS. And so that gives us some concern. We're also concerned with the way that EPA would allow those automakers to benefit from what's called book and claim accounting, which is essentially, the automaker is going to sign a contract with a renewable electricity producer, could be thousands of miles away, and when that electron enters the grid, the automaker gets to claim that carbon reduction benefit from that electron, whether it ever is used to fuel an electric vehicle or not. And so we have some concerns with inconsistent application of that accounting practice.
Now, I may have to spend a little more time with you, Mr. Cooper, to better understand that, but I appreciate
Be happy
you
to.
making me aware of that. Do you believe EPA's proposal aligns with congressional intent when it created the RFS nearly 2 decades ago?
That is another concern we have as we look at the statutory intent of the RFS program and our understanding of that intent. It was all about stimulating the production and use of renewable fuels, not necessarily about stimulating the production and use of certain vehicle technologies. We think if you all in Congress had intended the program to drive certain vehicle technologies, you would have been more explicit about that.
And is it appropriate for EPA to combine their eRINs rulemaking with 2023 through 2025 RVOs?
We have asked in the comments we just submitted to EPA last week that they sever that portion of the proposal or that portion of the rulemaking from the actual volume requirements. We think EPA should move ahead with finalizing those volume requirements, but it sounds like they need more time to really figure out this eRIN proposal and to make sure they're getting it right. So we would prefer to see EPA separate those two parts of the proposal from one another.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. Thank you for helping educate and inform the committee. I yield back.
You bet.
Remark on your comments. Well, one of the things when, during the State of the Union address, when President Biden mentioned this 1-decade goal, I thought about how without permitting reform, we don't stand a chance, because one of the largest wind energy facilities in the country has been developed in Wyoming by Philip Anschutz. And it took him over 10 years just to acquire the transmission line right away. And there's additional permitting that needs to be done there. So even for people who desire to move to electric vehicles and that can power houses and out of the garage, if there's no electricity available, it is because of the permitting burdens that come with building transmission lines. It's just an unachievable goal. So I think that even for people who aspire to President Biden's goal, that should become a priority.